I've never been blown away by Beavers. I've seen Beavers since after his sophomore season, freshman season at Cal, on the Cape for a little bit, and then obviously I've seen him a bunch in the minor leagues. And I mean, he's a good player. I just think it's more like an average regular, maybe like a good platoon bat. And that might be what he is. He might really, be a strong side platoon guy this year for the Orioles. Be interesting to see how that all shakes out. I think the performance was maybe a little bit above what his ability is. He's a top 100 prospect. I just probably would like him closer to 50 than 21. So that's where I'll go with that one. And then another one, I think Schultz is definitely one. And I'm not off Schultz. I was lower on Schultz going into last year. And I feel like I'm higher than consensus now on Schultz. And a lot of it is he had never thrown into the fifth inning like in his life going into this season, and was challenged with that to get deeper into starts. He did that. Struggled at times in the second time through the order. I think at times, having watched a lot of Schultz's starts and trying to kind of figure it out, there's a guy that I maybe don't like that's ranked higher, that's spoken about higher. I'll dig in a little bit more, kind of question my own evaluation, but also to just get a better understanding and maybe see something that I'm not seeing. And you end up, I think, ultimately stronger there. But like I thought it was a young guy going through a very difficult jump. And I think getting through the order the second time is a lot harder for young pitchers like this who don't have precise control and command. It's still really good stuff. His stuff moves a lot, which I think sometimes looks really cool on the pitching ninja gifts, but doesn't necessarily function as well. It's easier to lay off of a big sweeper because you see it coming in, or a big sinker. So some of that I think is maybe even taking a couple inches off of the sweeper. I don't know, or improving that cutter, using the changeup more effectively. All that sort of stuff factors in. I still think there's a starter here. I still think there's tremendous upside. But guys that are big like this and have command questions take a while. People always call up the Randy Johnson thing. I don't think he's Randy Johnson, but I think it's a good example. Tyler Glasnow, a bigger guy, took a little longer for him to find the strike zone. Obviously, he's still not found health, but turned into a very good starter when he's on the mound. So I'm not all the way gone, but I do think that the risk is a little bit higher with Schultz, and it could take a little bit longer. That ultimately that would push me down maybe closer to like 60 or somewhere like that on him. Like I said, I'm not all the way out, but I do think that you got to sort of take the season in stride. That he had to actually be a starter for the first time, and we see that a lot. Like Tink Hence was another one of these guys that when he was 3-4 inning starts, he was dominating, and then when he actually had to get through the second time through the lineup, it wasn't as good. And then obviously he also struggled with some health stuff as well. So it's weird with pitchers, man. Guys can be seem like they're way out there, and then all of a sudden they figure something out at 25, and you get the guy that you thought you were getting. So it'll be interesting to follow.
Yeah, no doubt. I lowered him outside my top 100, but obviously kind of different for like real life versus fantasy rankings. But maybe I lowered him too much, just worrying about the command and control and him just making it as a starter. Obviously, it's tough to be super patient on these guys in Dynasty, but you bring up some good points there. So we covered some guys who are in the top 100. How about a prospect or two outside the top 100 that you've been getting higher on over the last like month or two, either just from conversations or just your own digging or what you've seen from them in spring training?
Yeah, I think there's a few. Ethan Conrad from the Cubs is definitely one. You haven't gotten a ton of information on Conrad at this point, but I did see Conrad when he was healthy, prior to transferring to Wake Forest. I know the type of player that he is and what the upside is. Really good athlete, big body. There's power there. There's speed. I think he could turn, especially on the fantasy side, I think he could turn into a fantasy star. And, it wouldn't shock me if he pushes for the number one prospect in this Cubs system within the next few months, especially if, Ballesteros does make the team and get, enough service time days now that we've switched to that, or at bats to graduate before June 1st. It wouldn't shock me if Conrad's doing well in that first update. Conrad pushes up to, 3, 2, 1, somewhere in that range. Another guy that I would call out is, and once again, you're only seeing very limited looks at this point with players. A lot of the backfield stuff, hasn't fully ramped up, and I haven't been to Florida yet. So that's a big part of it. But David Hageman is another one. And I think a lot of these guys, it's stuff throughout the off season, digging in, having conversations with people around the game. And I really think that the Rangers might have really messed up here by making that deal for Kelly. Kelly comes back and signs. And, they sent a lot of talent over there. It was Bratt, who's decent back end of the rotation type of guy. Cole Drake, who was good rotation depth for them, though I know he got beat up a little bit in AAA. And then Hageman, who was the highest upside guy. And if you look at the Rangers draft philosophy over the last few years, they have done a really good job of targeting injured pitchers, that miss some time and therefore going in later rounds, going for lower bonuses than they would have gone for had they stayed healthy. I think Hageman is a guy that falls right into that. It's a really good fastball. It's a killer curveball. Curveball was a pitch that was mostly slider. And the Rangers kind of developed that. And then you get straight to the Diamondbacks and they're like, oh yeah, we know about the curveball. Throw that more. And he had a ton of success in high A down the stretch because of that. And I think, going into his first offseason fully healthy as a professional, new organization, all that sort of thing. There's a lot of belief there. And he's a guy that, has had a lot of buzz with scouts. So Hageman is definitely one, probably, is definitely in my personal top 100. Then another guy I'll throw out there who's had some backfield stuff pop up in the last week, and that's Dason Hill, left-handed pitcher from the Twins. He had 100 miles per hour the other day in the backfields. Adding more power for him in that 6'5" frame, getting a little more muscular, getting more mature is going to allow him not only to throw harder, miss more bats, but also I think get deeper into starts. And we're starting to see that. He's still really young, but a 6'5" frame with good stuff, good pitch traits, and feel for a secondary. So it will be really interesting to see what Hill is this year. I think he's a guy that could take a massive step forward and really push his way up the top 100. So that's some names that I'm kind of looking at outside the list, and they're all guys that were kind of we turn into 150, and they're all guys that were in that 150 range for most of our writers. And I've continued to hear some positive feedback on all of them.
Yeah, that Merrill Kelly trade, it took a week or two after the trade, I sort of realized it was the Hageman trade. That was the whole point of the trade, I think, for Arizona, was to get him in the door. And the Dason Hill, people are getting excited. Gotten some video of him creeping into my DMs. So glad you brought him up, Dason Hill, with the Twins, obviously. Now, do you want to say anything about you mentioned Justin Gonzalez? I know you've been pumping him up at all.
I mean, that's probably the guy that's been most impressive. I think he had a 97 mile per hour throw from the outfield yesterday too. The Aaron Judge comps are crazy, right? I kind of hate when we do that, because we set this expectation that these guys can even be good players, and they just, unless they are an MVP, an all-world player, the best hitter in baseball, it's and he was not Aaron Judge, and it's come on. But I think you look at Gonzalez, and I wrote a little bit about it last week. The swing decisions could still get better, but they're not awful. There's some give and take when it comes to chase rate, in my opinion, that there's a certain level of aggression, especially with bigger hitters who can catch, barrels on the shadow zone around the zone. That I don't care when those guys maybe have closer to a 30% chase rate.